My mum told me to call the sheriff's office after I get home. The sheriff actually went to the kid's house and told him to knock this stuff off, or I had every right to file stalking and harassment charges. The 180 Women's Shelter confirmed that what the principal and the liaison did was disgusting and actually dangerous. When I was in my early 20s, I drove down to Tucson, Arizona from Colorado to spend the weekend with my best friend and his girlfriend. Him and I had one of those nights set aside for him and I to camp in the desert for the night, something that we had both done countless times already throughout our lives, so we were pretty excited about it. The region we planned on camping in was due south of Tucson, but still well north of the US-Mexican border. Now, cut ahead to us arriving at the site in broad daylight, having a great time enjoying the areas and views and all that. We had set up camp for the night and sit out in foldable chairs, watching the amazing stars overhead before we eventually pass out. The road that we were parked off of had two directions, and was a narrow dirt road, either from Tucson towards Mexico or vice versa. So, as we sit peacefully, a large vehicle with insanely bright blue headlights rounds the corner coming from the south. Even from hundreds of feet away, they absolutely blinded us with those headlights. And instead of continuing down the road, they seemed to have noticed our tents and pulled off towards us. As they got closer, we could tell that this wasn't a Border Patrol truck. It was a very nice all-black Escalade with tinted windows that you could barely see through. The front two doors opened and two Hispanic men in flashy nice clothing got out and walked up to us. The headlights still on and blasting us with light from up close, casting an ominous silhouette on the two men as the light shined from behind them. They asked us, which way to Tucson? We're speechless for a second, but I tell them that it's down the road in the way that they were headed. They stared at me hard in the eyes for several moments until I was probably visibly rattled. I was fully convinced at the time that we were about to be executed or worse right then and there. But weirdly, they both laughed heavily and said, "Have a good night, white boys," and drove off towards Tucson. We didn't sleep very well that night. Now, I know that it may just seem like another simple conversation, but that shook us pretty hard, so we both said nothing of it the next morning and for years afterward as well. But I brought it up to him last year and reflected on it, and we both agreed that they were probably cartel and were just trying to strike fear into us. And well, they definitely succeeded. And because of those headlights, for the life of me, I really could not even remember what their faces looked like, even standing right in front of me like that. Honestly though, I'm kind of glad that I don't. Moral of the story is that there are some parts of the desert that you just don't go. This happened about 4 years ago in a small town in WA. My girlfriend, now ex, not that it really matters for the story, at the time, and I decided to plan a getaway trip for a long weekend in a yurt since we both love nature and going to a place far from the city in the middle of nowhere, well, it seemed like a good time to us. And it really was a great time too. The thing that struck me most about staying in that yurt though was just how dark and quiet it was at nighttime in the middle of the night. When you're not used to the wilderness like this, it's pretty striking how silent things can be and just how dark the outside is when there's no light pollution involved. The outhouse where we had to go to the bathroom for was also about 75 yards away from the yurt, and you had to take a flashlight with you in order to navigate the darkness. The first night that we were there as well, nature called and I went outside to find the bathroom. I shined the flashlight that cut through the darkness like a lightsaber around and spotted eyeshine. It was nothing more than a good-sized female deer, but I would have had no idea that she was there if I didn't see the eyes via the flashlight. The actual encounter, though, happened our last night there at maybe around 11 p.m. at night. We were playing cards inside the yurt by the fire when, out of nowhere, we heard this huge crash or bang on the side of the yurt, almost as if something threw itself on the side of it, or was running and didn't see it there until it was too late kind of thing. Obviously startled, we wanted to see what made such a sound. We were in the middle of nowhere, obviously, but we were still on a property and not very deep into the woods for it to have been a bear or a mountain lion. At least, I thought so. What happens next, though, is, well, pretty hard to explain, but I threw the door open and shined my flashlight like I did the night prior when I saw the deer. And I saw something in the same spot, but it was different. It had no eye shine, and I only saw it for a moment, but it looked like it was white or grey, and it had a slender build to it. What creeped me out was the way that it moved, though. It seemed to sort of crouch down while looking in my direction, slinking away out of frame like a big cat or a monkey might move out of the way. And then I never saw anything after that. Obviously, I did not want to investigate because I was terrified that it might have been a cougar or something to that effect, and I'm not trying to die in front of my girlfriend, even if she left me not long after this, but that aside, whatever I saw was unlike anything I had ever seen. Also, I never really made out a face, which was weird. I read on a post on this sub somewhere earlier today that someone had a Bigfoot encounter of it crawling across the ground, and for whatever reason it made me remember this encounter, and honestly it sort of sent shivers down my spine. I'm not saying that it was Bigfoot. Heck, it could have been something normal. I mean, I did only see it for maybe a few seconds at most, but I've just never really seen anything move like that in real life, or even in a movie or a TV show or anywhere. It was strange, and, well, I'm sorry for rambling, but I guess I'm wondering if anyone has had a similar encounter, or at least has an explanation for what the heck I could have seen that night. So if anyone watches Ghost Hunters, well, you can look up the episode called The Chinatown Poltergeist, and it's an episode inside of the bar that I worked at for half a year. On my first day to interview, the general manager and the bar manager were very clear with me that the bar, it definitely was haunted. They were really serious about it too, and that it was more mischievous than it was dangerous. Having had my own paranormal experiences in college, and having somewhat of a higher vibration, I wasn't too worried about it, and I really wanted or needed the job. A fun fact too is that Vinnie Paul Abbott of Pantera was actually there the night before he died. Blood on it, and an urn that apparently has a fraction of the ashes of Aleister Crowley. For a while I never really saw or heard anything, and I was left by myself alone in the bar a few times. I did put music on and just kind of sing like, maybe there's a spirit here and I'll give them a show. But I started to, well, change is the best way that I can describe it, really. I was always angry and frustrated. I would rationalize all these things that I should be happy and grateful for, but I just couldn't help it. I was always just really angry, and on a 120-degree day in Vegas, when a belligerent customer started harassing me, I told her to shut up, and as liberating as that was, because she really was a bit of an evil person, it was out of my character for a professional bartender of 13 years to do this. Then I started getting these weird rashes and marks all over my body, but I thought that I was getting really sick and got it in my head that I'd developed something really bad, but turns out it was just a rash of some sort. That led me to more stress though, lots of restless days, and eventually my herniated disc started acting up randomly and got to such a level of pain that I was having to scoop ice while on my knees. The pain in my back affected my performance so much that I actually ended up losing the job, And from there, I spiraled into 3 or 4 months of panic attacks and levels of anxiety that I never even thought that I was capable of experiencing. As a spiritual person that's still learning about God, I just called on that and I prayed for my strength. Eventually, I was able to push through, avoid medication, and worked my way out of the depression as well. But I just haven't been able to shake the effect that place had on me, and I was even warned about it too. I've never seen such a high turnover in a place, and there's very few of the staff that have stuck around for various reasons. One of the last messages from my bar manager was wishing me good luck and also an admission as to how weird the energy is there. It could have all just been coincidental and a nervous breakdown, I admit, but intuitively, I just really don't think so. So I recently had something particularly weird happen to me that's left me pretty icked out, and I'm curious if anyone here has ever had an experience or something similar to this, or has any thoughts on what they think that this could have been. So, a bit of context. My girlfriend and I will do this weird, high-pitched tongue trilling kind of noise back and forth when we're feeling goofy. It's a very specific noise though, and there's no real reason to make it, nor have we ever heard anyone else or anything else make it. It's a very particular noise. And well, a couple of nights ago, she and I were having a silly, goofy sort of little evening, and we had each had a gummy of a particular variety, if you catch my drift, listened to some music and watched some movies in the living room. We most definitely ended up making that sound a couple of times, and by midnight we had migrated into the bedroom and we fell asleep pretty much right away. Well, I wake up at around 3:30 in the morning to the exact sound that I explained earlier, seemingly coming from our living room though. At first, I figured that it must have just been a nightmare, but then I look over and my girlfriend is sitting bolt upright too. We sort of look at each other for a second, and then she just starts calling out for our cat, apparently thinking that it might have been her meowing or something, but said cat ended up being asleep right next to the bed. This freaked me out pretty bad, and I quickly got up and cleared the apartment to make sure that there wasn't another person inside with us, but I can assure you that there wasn't. I've tried to explain this mundanely, but I'm having a really hard time believing any of my explanations. We live in an old, very solid apartment building and only have 2 connecting neighbors. The walls between us are very thick, and we typically only hear the upstairs neighbors on occasion, and even then, rarely their voices. I mean, the exterior walls here are so thick that it can easily start thunderstorming and you won't even hear it. The noises that we heard, though, weren't even particularly loud or anything, but it was very, very clear, not muffled as if through a wall or anything like that. Any theories I've had about nightmares or residual effects from the aforementioned gummy have been neutralized by the fact that we both heard it and both woke up, especially since she's a pretty heavy sleeper as well. So, any thoughts or experiences would be very much appreciated right now. We don't feel unsafe or anything, but we definitely feel particularly creeped out by this. We're both pretty spiritually active people and have had some experiences that we've been unable to explain, but neither of us have ever had something like this happen before. So I'm a military brat and we move a lot. When I was 10 years old, we moved to a new house. The house was just built at least 2 years before we moved in, so we didn't think too much of it. Honestly, the place looked pretty nice and modern. I got the room that was kind of furthest away from all the other rooms, but I thought that this was a score since it had its own bathroom and I could be as loud as I wanted to. No one could really hear me. The first year living in that house was pretty good as well. Until I was in the 6th grade. In the 6th grade, I got bullied pretty badly since I was a new kid and didn't really have much good friends. It went on until the end of the school year as well. Now, that summer I started seeing things inside of my closet. It's like I would leave the house to go out and I would close my closet door, but when I'd come back it would always be open. I was too lazy to shut it again, so then later that night I'd turn towards it, and I swear that I could see a face in my closet. It was a shadowy figure just sort of looking at me. I told my parents about this and they told me that it was probably one of my stuffed animals. So after that, I just tried to ignore it. Until one night, I was just watching some TV and I saw in the corner of my eyes stuff moving in my room. I had this lamp in the corner of my desk and somehow it was just sort of turned around. Next to that, 3 of my drawers were opened, and so I thought to myself, that's strange. The next day, I told my mum about it, and after that, well, it all just went to hell. So I told my mum about it, and she let me sleep in her room since I was young and scared. The next morning, we went into my room, and it just felt cold and empty, like all the light had been sucked out of there. I come from a Catholic family too, and when stuff like this happens, we call a priest immediately. So we called a priest, and he said that he'll come down within 3 to 5 days. And those 3 to 5 days were absolutely crazy. Like at night, we'd hear scratches on the wall, doorknobs moving, screaming coming from the hallway leading to my room, the light turning off and on. Once, the television even turned off and on. The day that the priest got there, we did an exorcism for the house, and he basically put some salt, holy water, and oil into a bowl and started praying. But when he did this, it felt like the whole place was just sort of like shaking almost, vibrating. We thought that all of our problems were just solved, but it only got worse from there. After that, the priest got very sick and the house just kept feeling even more dark. My dad, he isn't really a believer in this sort of stuff. He thought that we were all just sort of BSing him and that it was all just a bit of a sick joke that we made up. His and my mum's marriage was already falling apart and they'd fight every day since we moved into that place. So they got into a fight over this, and my mum told him that she hopes whatever entity is in the house gets to him. And right after she said that, he swears that he was possessed by something. This thing in my house went into his body apparently, and his whole face started leaking snot. What I mean is like, it came out of his ears, his eyes and nose, and his eyes were just not his. It was like looking into the eyes of a different person almost. Eventually he fell to the floor and came to, but that was obviously very, very scary. After that happened, he knew that we needed to get out of there as well. So he applied for housing on the military base, and we just waited and prayed that whatever was in our house would go away. From time to time, I would see shadows of people. It's like I would be sitting at the dining table, and in the corner of my eyes I would see the body of a man, but it was just black shadow, completely black. And usually he had a hat on as well. Sometimes I would see a lady just standing in the hallway looking at us. Eventually a priest that did training at the Vatican got hold of us and came over to bless the house. Weirdly too, without even coming inside the house, he knew that something evil was with us. After talking to all of us, he let us know that our house was definitely haunted and we needed to get out before anything worse happened. He said though that whatever this demon was, they apparently wanted to get me since I was so vulnerable and young. After he had left, I started to experience out-of-body events as well. I would have these dreams where it was like I was just sort of floating above my body and I just wasn't there sort of thing. I started to hear voices in my head that weren't people around me or anything, and I also started having evil thoughts of harming other people. When I told my mother about this, she started sending me out of the house to play with other kids, so that I wouldn't be exposed to the place. One of the weirdest things that happened at that house was that we were all out for the day and the mailman came to deliver a package, and after speaking to the mailman eventually, we found out that an old woman allegedly opened the door. Obviously though, there was no old woman living in our house at the time. So when we came home and the package wasn't there, we obviously called the mail office and they told us that an old woman answered the door and told them that we didn't live there anymore, like we were just gone. After that too, my dad called almost every day to see how much longer until we could live on base. We had locked up my old room and put a line of salt outside the door at this stage. We had also covered each mirror as it could allegedly be a portal to the other side. The scratches continued until we moved out. So did all of the shadow people, the voices, and all of the weird touches and feelings that we get. After all summer of this happening, we were finally able to move on base. And when we did, everything just stopped. I still had a couple of dreams in our new house, but nothing like that experience ever again. Dayton, Ohio, between the years of 1997 and 2007, and also 2020. I was 8 when we moved into this old country house on 89 acres of land, and I lived there for about 10 years. Previously, we lived in a ranch-style home in a neighborhood. I've returned several times, never alone, because it's my home, but also never alone because, well, that's just dumb. Allow me to explain. When we first moved in, my brother and sister would notice red eyes peering through windows. Not low either, but quite high up, always looking down. This happened weekly as well, almost nightly, those eyes. We developed a fear of windows because of this, but nevertheless we tried to make what we could out of living there. I mean, something was just looking into the house and we really didn't know what it was. And to be honest, we hadn't experienced anything else, so eventually we ventured into the woods to try and figure out what it was. We played in the creeks, but would never go out at night. Time moved on, Mum and Dad divorced, and we left briefly, only to return back with my dad and his new wife. I was the only child living in the house. My siblings lived with my mum and my step-siblings with their dad. It wouldn't be long as well, and I would hear weird things in that house. Footsteps walking across upstairs, coming down the stairs, opening the door, and no one there. My dad, an absolute twit, didn't care for curtains, so I eventually put up blankets on all of my bedroom windows. I always, and I mean always, felt like I was being watched. I was also lucky enough to have a deadbolt on my bedroom door, which I utilized every single night. Now, I never put too much thought into it, but all the doors did, and even the front door had 6 locks on it. All of them had locks. I never thought them any good because, I mean, the door was mostly glass window anyway. And those locks really wouldn't stop much, but still, why were they there and why were there so many? Bear with me here because I'm getting to the juicy bit soon. So one Saturday night, it's just me and my brother and stepbrother. We're watching some recap of WWE and I'm playing Free Cell on the computer in the dining room next to an open window. I know, open window, right? You just said windows were bad. It was summer and I was 15 and we lacked AC and I felt comfortable and safe with my brother there. Anyway, whistling. I hear whistling outside. It's midnight, so who the heck is outside whistling? It must be my dad, I thought. No, Dad would have to walk past me to get out, and he'd be irritated that we were still up this late. So, who is whistling? Whoever it is, the whistling's getting closer, walking the sidewalk around the house. I hear this, and so I quickly get my brothers. They do the same thing. They think it's Dad, which I quickly debunk. We're all pretty terrified at this stage. I hurry us to my room so that we could see what it might be. When it nears our side of the house and I look my door, we stand there quietly. The front door opens and the whistling stops. Now there's footsteps. I'm begging please to go upstairs to my brother. Whoever this is, we are definitely better off upstairs because Dad is upstairs in bed. The footsteps start coming to my room though. My brothers and I instantly look at each other in fear. Their eyes began to well up and my stepbrother started to cry quietly. The footsteps step in front of our door, and then silence. I eventually work up enough courage to try and peek through the keyhole. I cannot see a thing though. I can sort of see into the hall, but whatever is on the other side, it's out of view. So I get on my belly to look under the door, and that was when I see shoes. I don't remember shoes being there when we came in, but I also don't remember paying attention to that detail, so I'm not sure if these are shoes from somebody standing there or if they've just been left there by one of us. So I whisper to my brothers, "Where are your shoes?" One points across my room, the other to his feet. I wore boots exclusively, so they definitely weren't mine. So that means that there must be an intruder, and that they're right outside of my door now. I'm not going out without a fight, so I conjure a quick plan, one that involved my swords, yes, swords, and me going out of the door first in a charge. We count to 3 and